The night that changed everything. If you think you've heard the darkest stories before, think again. Hit subscribe, drop a comment, and stay with us because this case didn't just shock America, it changed lives forever. The rain hadn't stopped for hours. By the time police arrived, the narrow suburban street was glowing under red and blue lights, reflecting off wet asphalt like a distorted mirror. Neighbors stood behind yellow tape, whispering, watching, trying to understand how something this violent could happen here. Inside the house, everything was still. Too still. Detective Laura Bennett stepped through the front door carefully, her boots leaving faint prints on the damp floor. The air was thick, heavy with tension, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. "Clear the back," she ordered quietly. Officers moved quickly, sweeping through the rooms. The call had come in just 20 minutes earlier. A neighbor reported hearing shouting, then silence. No one expected this. The living room told part of the story. Furniture slightly out of place. A broken lamp. Signs of a struggle. But nothing chaotic. Nothing that matched the severity of what they had been told. Then Bennett stepped into the hallway. And everything changed. At the far end, the bedroom door stood half open. A faint light spilled out, flickering slightly. She pushed it open. And froze. A young woman lay motionless on the floor, her hand stretched toward the door as if she had tried to escape. Her expression was locked in fear. The room around her was quiet, undisturbed, almost peaceful, if not for the reality of what had happened. "Call it in," Bennett said, her voice steady but low. "We've got a confirmed homicide." The victim was identified within the hour. Emily Carter, 22, college student. No known enemies. No criminal history. Nothing that suggested she would ever be at the center of something like this. Which made it worse. Because when a crime has no obvious motive, it usually means something is being hidden. The investigation moved fast. Neighbors were questioned. Security footage from nearby homes was collected. Every detail was examined, every timeline reconstructed. And then a name surfaced. Jason Miller, 19 years old, lived 3 houses down. According to one witness, he had been seen near Emily's house earlier that night. Alone. Nervous. At first, it seemed like a weak lead. Until they found something else. A partial fingerprint on the inside of Emily's bedroom door. It matched Jason Miller. By sunrise, officers were at his house. The arrest was quick. Too quick. Jason didn't run. Didn't resist. He looked confused more than anything else, standing there in a hoodie, rain dripping from the edges as officers placed him in handcuffs. "I didn't do anything," he kept saying. "You've got the wrong person." But the evidence said otherwise. At least, that's what it looked like. During interrogation, Jason's story never changed. He admitted he had been near the house, but claimed he never went inside. "I heard something," he said. "Like a shout. I walked up to check, but the door was already open. I got scared and left." Detective Bennett watched him closely. No hesitation. No cracks. Either he was telling the truth, or he was better at lying than anyone they'd ever seen. Then came the final piece. The one that sealed his fate. A search of Jason's room uncovered a small object hidden inside his drawer. A necklace. Delicate. Silver. Recognized immediately. It belonged to Emily Carter. The room went silent. Because that wasn't just suspicious. That was damning. Jason Miller was charged within 48 hours. The media exploded. Headlines spread across the country. A teenager. A brutal crime. A grieving family demanding justice. The case moved quickly. Too quickly. And as Detective Bennett stood in the evidence room days later, staring at the necklace sealed inside a plastic bag, something didn't sit right. Because according to the crime scene photos, Emily Carter wasn't wearing that necklace the night she died. Which meant only one thing. Someone had been in that room after the crime. And they had taken it. But when Bennett requested a full re-examination of the timeline, her superiors shut it down immediately. "Case is closed," he said. "We've got our suspect." Bennett didn't argue. But as she walked out, one question kept echoing in her mind. If Jason Miller didn't take the necklace, then who did? And more importantly, why was someone trying so hard to make sure he took the fall? The evidence that didn't fit. The trial began less than 4 months later.
Fast.
Efficient.
Clean.
Too clean. The courtroom was packed on the first day. Reporters, locals, even strangers drawn in by the story that had already taken over national headlines. A 19-year-old accused of killing a young woman in her own home. It was the kind of case people thought they understood before hearing a single word of testimony. Jason Miller sat at the defense table, hands folded, shoulders tense. He looked smaller than he had the night of his arrest, like the weight of everything had finally settled in. Across the room, Emily Carter's family sat in silence. Grief turned into quiet determination. They wanted answers. They wanted justice. And the prosecution was ready to give it to them. They laid out the case with confidence. Jason had been seen near the house. His fingerprint was on the bedroom door. The victim's necklace was found in his possession. Each point landed harder than the last. Simple.
Direct.
Convincing. Detective Laura Bennett sat in the back, listening carefully. On paper, it all made sense, but something still felt wrong. When Jason took the stand, the room shifted. "I didn't kill her," he said, his voice steady despite the tension. "I told them the truth from the beginning. I was outside. I heard something. I got scared and left." The prosecutor stepped forward. "Then how do you explain the necklace in your drawer?" Jason hesitated for the first time. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've never seen it before they showed it to me." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The defense tried to raise doubts, questioning how the necklace could have ended up there, pointing out the lack of direct witnesses, highlighting the absence of any clear motive. But it wasn't enough, because the jury didn't need certainty. They needed a story that made sense. And the prosecution had already given them one.
Guilty.
The word landed like a final blow. Sentencing came days later. Due to the severity of the crime and the way it had shaken the community, the court handed down the harshest penalty available.
Death.
Jason didn't react. He just stared ahead, as if the world around him had stopped making sense. But for Detective Bennett, that was only the beginning. Because weeks after the trial ended, she went back to the case file. Alone. Off the record. She reviewed the crime scene photos again. Every angle. Every detail. And then she saw it. Something she had missed before. The bedroom window. Slightly open.
Not forced.
Not broken. Just open. According to the original report, it had been dismissed. The assumption was that Emily had opened it earlier that evening. But Bennett didn't buy it. She pulled the weather records from that night. Heavy rain. Strong wind. No one leaves a window open in that kind of weather. Unless
they didn't open it.
Someone else did. The possibility changed everything. Bennett dug deeper. She requested access to nearby traffic cameras, footage that had never been fully analyzed during the initial investigation. Hours of video. Nothing at first. Then, just after 2 a.m., minutes before the estimated time of death, a vehicle passed slowly down the street. Dark-colored sedan. No license plate visible. But it didn't belong. It wasn't from the neighborhood. And it didn't just pass through. It stopped. Right near Emily's house. Bennett leaned closer to the screen. The footage was grainy, but clear enough to make out one detail. The driver's side door opened. Someone stepped out.
Tall.
Broad-shouldered. Not Jason. Not even close. Her pulse quickened. Because this wasn't just new evidence. This was proof. Proof that someone else had been there. Someone who had never been questioned. But when Bennett tried to file a formal report, she was called into her superior's office. The door closed behind her. "You need to let this go," he said. "There's another suspect," she pushed back. "We have footage. We have a conviction," he cut in sharply. "And we're not reopening a case that's already settled." Bennett stared at him, disbelief creeping in. "This isn't about convenience," she said. "It's about the truth." Her superior's expression hardened. "Careful, detective," he said quietly. "Some truths cause more damage than the lie." That was the moment she knew. This wasn't just a mistake. It was being buried. And whoever had been in that car that night was someone powerful enough to make sure the wrong man paid the price. But the deeper Bennett went, the more dangerous it became. Because 2 days later, The traffic footage she had secured
Was gone.
deleted, like it had never existed. And someone wanted to make sure she stopped asking questions. The truth they tried to bury. The first threat came as silence. No calls. No warnings. Just absence. Detective Laura Bennett stood in the evidence room, staring at the empty folder where the traffic footage had been stored. The system logs had been wiped clean, no access records, no trace of deletion. It was as if the evidence had never existed. But Bennett knew better. Someone had removed it, and they had the authority to do it without leaving a mark. That meant one thing. This wasn't just corruption. This was control. Jason Miller now sat on death row, his execution date scheduled. The clock was ticking, and every day that passed made it harder to undo what had already been set in motion. But Bennett wasn't done. She went back to the beginning, back to the night of the murder, and this time she stopped looking at the evidence and started looking at the people who had access, who had influence, who had something to lose if the truth came out. The answer surfaced in a name she hadn't expected: Daniel Carter, Emily's older brother. Respected, quiet, untouchable, and recently promoted within the city's infrastructure department, giving him access to maintenance systems, traffic grids, and surveillance networks. Bennett felt the pieces begin to align. She pulled his records, cross-referenced his movements, and then she found it. A parking citation issued 2 streets away from Emily's house on the night she died. Time-stamped, just minutes before the estimated window of the crime. Bennett's heart pounded. This wasn't coincidence. This was proximity. She tracked down the officer who issued the ticket. At first, he hesitated, but when shown the case file, something shifted. "Yeah," he said slowly. "I remember the car. Guy inside didn't want to roll down the window. Kept his face turned away." "Did you see him clearly?" Bennett asked. The officer nodded. Enough to know it wasn't some kid. That was all she needed. Bennett moved fast. She secured a quiet warrant, pulled what little remained from archived traffic backups, fragments, corrupted files, anything. And then she found it. A single frame. Blurry. Damaged. But unmistakable. The same dark sedan. And inside it, a partial reflection in the side mirror. A face. Daniel Carter. Everything stopped making sense. And then, suddenly, it all did. The motive. The access. The cover-up. Emily had been planning to leave town. Start over. Cut ties. Something had pushed her to that decision, something close to home. Something dangerous. When Bennett finally confronted Daniel, it wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No chase. Just silence. He sat across from her in the interrogation room, calm, composed, until she placed the image on the table. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his expression changed. "You should have let it go," he said quietly. "Why?" Bennett asked. "Because you thought no one would look twice?" Daniel leaned back, exhaling slowly. "She wasn't supposed to die," he admitted. "It was an argument. She threatened to expose everything, things that would have destroyed my career, my life." "So you went there," Bennett said. "And when things got out of control," he didn't answer. He didn't need to. "The necklace," Bennett continued. "You took it. Planted it in Jason's room. You needed someone else to take the fall." Daniel gave a faint, hollow smile. "And it worked," he said. The words hung in the air like a confession. But what came next hit even harder. "You think I did all that alone?" he added. Bennett's expression froze. Because deep down she already knew. Her superior. The deleted footage. The pressure to shut the case down. This wasn't just one man covering his tracks. It was a system protecting him. But not anymore. Daniel Carter was arrested that night. The case exploded across the country. Headlines shifted. Public outrage grew. And just days before his scheduled execution, Jason Miller was exonerated. 19 years old when he was convicted. Years stolen from his life for a crime he didn't commit. But the story didn't end there. Because during the investigation, multiple internal officers were quietly removed from their positions. Records were sealed. Details were withheld. And some names were never released. Months later, as the media attention faded, Detective Bennett received an anonymous envelope. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, taken from a distance. It showed a man stepping out of a car on a different street. Different night, different case. But the method, the setup, was identical. Bennett stared at it, her chest tightening, because Daniel Carter had been caught. But whoever helped him was still out there, watching, waiting, and maybe already choosing the next person to take the blame. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for what comes next.